person, how would you decide?
Well, interesting question. I don't know. I'd have to do some research on that.
All right, hey there, YouTube. Dapper Dinosaur here. We are here with Dapper Reacts. What is this, 26? Is that what this is? 26 it is. Awesome. So, I am here without a guest. So, in an effort to keep that being fun for me, we're going to do the drinking rules. So, that means that the drinking rules are going to be in full force, but we will be going over them momentarily. First I want to say, welcome everybody. In case you are unaware, this is the show where basically me and often Vishanti, but technically whoever I can wrangle, or sometimes just me, reacts to things that I find online that I don't think are worth like actually scripting a full series about, but that I still want to talk about and still want to react to. Usually relatively like low tier, although not as low tier as say Matt Powell usually. But yeah, so today we're looking at a series of speeches given at a conference held by Genesis Apologetics, which is, goodness, one of the worst of the actual, like, professional young earth creationist myths. They're really, really dumb. And while I do know that the title and the thumbnail is all about Dave Reeves, we do have to finish up with a little bit more of Randy Galuza before we get into it. So, we do have to suffer through a little bit more Randy, sorry, before we get to Dave. Also, at Ajo64, I'm going to go with Ajo for now, unless I get corrected. 64, who's been a member for 4 months and is at the Amniote level, says, let's get this party started. Indeed. Which means we're going to start talking about the drinking rules. Yes, Vishanti couldn't be with me today because Vishanti is off actually having fun rather than having me forcing her to suffer through nonsense. So, you know, I can't blame her. Royland Hutchins for $2 sends a Godzilla emoji, which first we will drink for the Godzilla emoji. We'll talk about that in just a second. Followed by a Kent Hovind get bent and an AIG is a bag of dicks emoji. Awesome. Also, Alia Jane, who's been a member for 4 months and is at the Soropsid level, says, Godzilla's blessing upon you and trans rights with a Godzilla emoji. We'll take a drink for that too. So, we'll talk about the drinking rules. As you can see, obviously, if you are a channel member and you send either a super chat or a channel milestone chat that includes one of the 3 kaiju emojis, then we will take a drink. Also, Evidence and Reason says, I was going to volunteer at David Reeves' new $100 million museum to give lectures and record TV shows. The deal didn't happen. I was expecting to be this year. Well, I don't know how to react to that, Sal, because on the one hand, I mean, David Reeves, I don't consider him to be much of a step above Kent Hovind in terms of his intellectual prowess, so I imagine that his museum is of similar level. But on the other hand, I can see why that would be a disappointment to you, which I don't like it that, you know, the thing that you thought was going to work out isn't going to work out, so that sucks. But yeah, I don't know. Sorry, I have mixed feelings about that. Ian Chen Official for $2.99 redo says AIG or a tub of Colgate. You know what? I think I know where you're going for there, so I'll take a drink. That's one of the other drink triggers. If anyone super chats anything to the effect that AIG or a bag of dicks, we will take a drink. But you have to be careful, because if you just say that, YouTube will censor it. You have to do clever things like put it into another language or use puns or things. I especially like it if you can use alliteration in your puns. That's always extra fun. We will also take a drink if the creationist we're responding to is just so dumb that I kind of have to in order to give my brain like some coolant. You can kind of think of my brain as like a nuclear reactor, right? And all the stupid stuff is the neutrons starting to heat up my nuclear reactor. And I have to pour alcohol on it to cool it off, because this is one of those like open vessel boiling reactors, right? Can't let the coolant boil away. Gotta keep adding more coolant as the power goes up, or you're just all gonna boil away. That's no good. You'll have an uncooled reactor. That's my brain. I have no idea where that analogy came from. Just don't worry about it. Anyway, also, if the creationists get something that's actually factually accurate to the best of our knowledge, and he's not, say he, it could be a she, I guess, but today it's not going to be, and he's not just quoting something, he's actually pulling it out of his own brain, then we'll take a drink for that. We'll also take a drink for any jokes that don't land. Anytime the Creationist mentions the National Socialist German Workers' Party, or, various leaders and other bigwigs in said party, or their various activities, especially in the early to mid-20th century. We'll also take a drink if... Now, normally we have a prediction where, if I can predict what's coming, with only one person it doesn't work as well because, we have to, have some kind of, bouncing ideas off of the other guest or something. So I usually leave predictions out if I'm just by myself, but instead what I'm going to do is I'm going to add in does the source that the Creationist is citing actually disagree with them drink trigger? That's because it kept happening so much for Randy Galuza. Also, if anyone gifts memberships, which is a thing you can do, each membership is $5, and that just adds people semi-randomly to the membership rolls. If anyone does that, then I will take a drink per gifted subscription, which means if you want to gift 50 drinks, 50 memberships, that's what it is. I'll basically down whatever I have available. Also, if a story is told that we're pretty sure didn't happen, like if someone just confuses an argument they won with their shampoo bottle with an argument they won with a hypothetical Berkeley professor on a plane to California, then we'll take a drink for that. Yeah, Trojan source, basically, as Dr. Tapioca Weasel says. Yeah, if we see a Trojan source, we'll drink for that. Also, Too Young to Feel This Old has just gifted 5 Dapper Dinosaur memberships. They have gone to Skeletor, over 9,000, Soulcat, Dustin Carroll, HL, Aristoteles, there we go, and Supercritical Snake. So let's take 5 drinks before we even get into this. Here we go. 1, 2, 3, 4, and 5. And guys, if you're already a member, send those tetrapod emojis. Don't send, I see you doing it, don't send the pelagic tunicate emojis to welcome new members. That's so insulting. Ian Chen Official for $2.99 redo says, AIG is a Pokeball full of squirrel. Goodness, okay. Sure, I'll take a drink for it. All right, well, thank you very much. Oh, also, Ali Jane says, statements in Septuagint are sausages in the satchel. Rusty Longshanks says, Ham's henchmen are a hoary horde of ham horns. Nice. Also, if I remember correctly, I do think that we now, with those gifted memberships, may qualify for the next emoji. If that happens, I think I'll just make a Vishanti emoji, since that was also a fairly popular option in addition to the straw man. So I have to double check on that. So no promises, but that might be coming soon. Anyway, let's actually get into this Randy Galuza. Randy was basically telling us how the fact that basically stick spiders can convergently evolve to ecomorphs that are morphologically similar to previous ecomorphs, that this is somehow an example of his continuous environmental tracking, even though it actually has no evidence that the stick spiders are actually noticing a difference in their environment and adapting themselves. This is after he lied about myrmecoid beetles and said that adult beetles could change into myrmecoid forms as adults in the presence of army ants, which is an absolute lie, which was contradicted by the paper he cited in support of his conclusion. So we're going to continue hearing a little bit more about Hawaiian stick spiders. We've already noticed that this is a Trojan source, where the source itself contradicts his claim that this is somehow a non-natural selection-based phenomenon that is a result of spiders being engineered somehow. So here we go.
But Hawaiian stick spiders of the Aramnus genus have repeatedly evolved the same distinctive forms known as ecomorphs on different islands. The researcher was a gal, she said. The spiders, quote...
Did he say the researcher was a gal? I think he's trying to say gal, which is a weird thing to point out. You're already using feminine pronouns for her, but whatever.
Arrive on the island and boom! You get independent evolution to the same set of forms, this sort of rapid and repeated evolution. Now, is it really evolution? Of course.
Well, okay, let's find out. So, in the paper, which you can watch last time to get a few more details, you can watch the previous episode to get a few more details on. That was on Tuesday. We found out that there were, in fact, genetic genetic distinctives of these various groups, ecomorphs, that their genetics changed when they adapted to new environments, and that this happened over generations. So evolution is a change in allele frequencies in a population over generations, which means, yes, this is indeed evolution. This meets the minimum definition, or the minimum requirements for what it takes to be evolution. The Enchant official for $2.99 redo says, in AIG tool belt is a pneumatic navel nudger. It sounds like someone's been watching The Room with Tommy Wiseau too much. Navel nudger. Take a drink for that, though. So yeah, it's sort of like saying you're not playing baseball because you're not playing in the major leagues in an actual giant stadium, and you're just having a pickup game with your friends. The thing is, none of that's required to be playing baseball. Now, to be doing the most spectacular and popular version of baseball, sure, you might need to be on an actual Major League Baseball team, complete with the jersey and like the helmet that only has like the one ear that hangs down, and you got a professional wooden bat and like a certified baseballer or whatever. Fine, that's baseball. But at a minimum, if you've got enough people to man the field and to have like a batting roster, and you have those people throwing the ball to the batter and hitting or striking or, calling fouls and whatnot, you're running around the bases as per normal, catching fly balls for outs and counting outs and strikes and whatnot, and following the rules of baseball, then you've met the requirements of playing baseball. Similarly, while this isn't a spectacular bacterium evolving all the way into an elephant or a pine tree or something, this still meets the minimum definition. It doesn't matter that Randy doesn't think it's cool enough. So we're just going to take a drink for Randy basically saying, is this thing that's obviously evolution really evolution? Yes, Randy, it is.
It isn't. It's the fact that these organisms are able to what? You're supposed to say it. Adjust themselves. Adjust themselves.
Okay, but Randy, you keep saying that as if it's supposed to be individual organisms adjusting themselves within an adult lifespan. But that's not what's been happening in any of your examples. Also, Savage Cobra Kinda Official for $5 says, AIG is a satchel of Schwanstucker and should respond to the failure of their ideas with quiet dignity and grace, which they will not. So we'll take a drink. Okay, Boomer Lady, I'm pretty sure this is Polish, a language that I know not a word of. So AIG Towerek Kirbasi Nazdroya, I think. I know it's Slavic, so I don't know, that's all I got. And I'm pretty sure that the L with the slash is like an unvoiced lateral fricative, I think. But I'm pretty sure I know what you're going for, so we'll take a drink for it. Yeah, contrary to popular belief, I don't know all the languages, but I'll give it a shot.
To these different kind of islands. She goes on to say this. We can ask whether there might be an underlying mechanism that leads to these similar patterns of predictably repeated evolution in the course of adaptive radiation. That the Aramnus spiders have some sort.
Also, okay, look, you guys know that I'm pretty loose with pronunciation of scientific terms for organisms, right? My rule of thumb is pronounce every vowel and every consonant in the order they're written with some kind of somewhat reasonable value for each one. This is Ariamnus, not Aramnus. There's an I in there. Don't skip over vowels just because you're not sure what to do with them. Just come up with something reasonable. You'll be okay. It's not like scientists pronounce all of these things the exact same way, even ones who speak the same language. So, yeah.
Sort of pre-programmed switch in their DNA that can be quickly turned on to allow them to evolve rapidly into their successful forms, but how this process might work is still unclear.
Also, Dark Law Dragon, member for 11 months and is at the tetrapod level, sends Godzilla, Mothra, and Ghidorah with a drink emoji, so we shall. Also sends an AIG bag of dicks emoji. Sorry, technically it's actually an emoji with a bag labeled AIG that's full of eggplants, but I think y'all know what that means.
Let me give you a clue. Look for sensors, internal programming, and output responses.
Okay, Randy, that would be cool if these spiders were doing this within a single lifetime, but they're not. We saw that in the paper. That's Randy's whole problem, right? He's basically saying the same thing that makes it so that if you take your dog and move it from like Maine to like southern Arizona means that it sheds its fur more, is then going to affect the future generations of dogs and how they're born. And while there is some epigenetic change that will be passed down, that's still broadly not the way it works, right? Randy is trying to get that kind of thing to account for the observable and measurable genetic divergence of populations through evolutionary time. It doesn't. There's actual genetic changes, and he's basically just saying that like a combination of phenotypic plasticity plus epigenetics is going to just cover all of what we observe for at least as much evolution as he's going to accept. Remember, creationists as a rule don't just reject common ancestry. They reject universal common ancestry. But they maintain common ancestry to a certain extent, right? Usually somewhere around the family level, even if families are arbitrary. So Randy thinks that all canids have a common ancestor. I promise, the process by which a dog sheds its fur more in the heat will not get you a fox and a wolf and a jackal and a maned wolf and a short-eared dog and a dhole, all from one species of canid. That's not how it's going to work. They have distinct genetics. Their genomes are different, not just the epigenome.
Corresponding elements to a human-engineered adaptable system, and maybe this will be it. And I'll end with this one final one.
I'll say, yeah, maybe, Randy. You got to find out evidence of that being the case, though. And to be fair to him, what I've seen from ICR very recently, more recently than this video, is that they are trying. Now, I think currently that their current findings, which is that they can get cave fish to have darker coloration after exposing them to bright light, is not enough to cut it, but at least he's trying. So you know what? He's doing more than most creationists are. Even though this is so dumb that even virtually every other creationist out there has been like, no, Randy, please don't. Also, please do hit like. I'm seeing about 30 people who haven't. It really helps the channel out.
This is kind of cool. This gentleman here, since you already have all my slides, you can read the rest of the story anyway on this. He's the world's leading researcher of what creature?
The anole? I'm going to go with the anole.
There's a clue on the screen. Lizards.
He's the top researcher of just lizards. That's dumb. There's no such thing as the top researcher on lizards. Far too broad of a category to have a single top researcher. Now, that doesn't mean that he's not one of the top lizard researchers. But the idea that you could have a top researcher on a subject as broad as lizards is just crazy. That's like saying, oh, this is the top researcher on ungulates, like every animal with a hoof. No. But whatever. Take a drink for it.
Lizards on that. I was just comparing you to Texans on.
Inkboy for €5 says, in debate of pine trees and elephant ancestor, mammoth trees exist. Okay. Also, I think that a pack of cucumbers should be called an AIG. Nice. I'll take a drink. Somehow I don't think that the existence of a group of trees called mammoth trees is itself direct evidence of the common ancestry of mammoths and pine trees, or elephants and pine trees for that matter. But hey, what do I know? I'm neither a treeologist nor an elephantologist.
That, because when I say this in Texas, he's the world's leading researcher of what? They'll say bugs or something like that. So I was just going to check you out on that.
I mean, I'm glad his audience is laughing. I don't get it. Is the joke that Texans are just dumb? Whatever.
He's the world's leading researcher on these lizards.
These lizards. Okay. Not lizards, these lizards, Randy. There's a difference.
He does an incredible amount of research in the Caribbean islands, and he found that on islands with big, tall trees, these lizards, and you can get different shapes living in even different parts of the trees, these lizards have long legs, and they're able to scramble up and down the tree with these really, really long legs. And then he noticed on islands that didn't have tall trees but had small, scrubby vegetation, they had short little legs. Well, a hurricane came through and killed all the lizards on 7 islands. And the 7 islands had scrubby little vegetation on them. And he did a really cool experiment. He went to the islands where they had the tall trees, and he took lizards from those islands with what kind of legs? Long legs. And he repopulated the islands with scrubby vegetation. Now, isn't that kind of a cool experiment?
I mean, yeah, but assuming that there's a selection pressure for short legs in scrubby environments, what prevents this from just being natural selection, Randy? Are you saying that the lizard legs shrank as they were adults? Is that what we're going to hear? Because we're going to need a citation for that one. And if we get one, here's betting it's a Trojan citation.
He let them go. Watch what would happen. And he said this: our prediction was that they would evolve shorter legs.
Okay, hold on. We got a source here. So we got to look it up. So we've got Losos JB, Improbable Destinies, Fate, Chance, and the Future of Evolution. There we go. Oh, of course. It's an entire book. But page 178 should have tipped me off to that. Of course. So I'm not going to be able to get a look at this really today. I might be able to get, if I just take that quote, I might be able to get the context, but that's about it. Let's find out. Our prediction was that they would evolve shorter legs, and they did over the course of 4 years. Average limb length steadily, if I can spell it right, there we go, declined on all 7 islands. And then there's an ellipsis, so I'm just going to end the quote there, see what we can get. Adaptive solutions are... That's just the Institute for Creation Research. Thanks. Oh, Google Books might have it as an excerpt. Page 178. Okay, here we go. Now we're going to see what Randy says about this. But if he says that it's just the lizards shrinking their own legs within adult lifetimes, we're going to see what we can find on the Google Books. So, fingers crossed. I normally cannot get a hold of actual, published books. Which also, by the fact that he's pulling this from a published book, that means he could not actually find a paper to cite. Remember, published books like this are secondary sources. They're for lay people. This is not the actual peer-reviewed literature, which is where he should be getting this from.
And they did. Over the course of 4 million years.
What is funny, limb length is a fairly simple thing to change. Humans did it with dogs over the course of a few hundred years to get long-legged dogs into, dachshunds. I'm going to drink for his audience being so dumb that thinking that the fact that limbs can shrink over the course of a few years is funny.
Over the course of 4 years, average limb length steadily declined on all 7 islands, exactly as predicted. All 7 islands were evolving in lockstep.
Yeah, all 7 islands had similar environments with similar selection pressures. Okay.
Now that is a cool experiment.
Agreed.
On that. You know what? From this day on, change your view of creatures.
Oh, the Fearmonger says, I'm going to count that as citing a PopSci article. Yeah, that's fine, as far as I'm concerned. Now, look, I'm not in charge of your bingo cards. But yeah, I mean, this is secondary literature. Really, what that square means to me is citing secondary rather than primary literature.
Change your view of creatures. They have an innate ability to adjust themselves.
All right, let's take a look at what we have here. So, this is in a... Page 176 is not part of this. It's from 175 to 176. All right. We'll start in 177. This is the author here speaking, presumably. We returned to the island the following May for our next census. Again, we captured all survivors. We know that the habitat differences were even greater as the lizards on the curly-tailed islands were spending even less time on the ground and using narrower perches. We again calculated selection gradients. So their prediction is based on calculating selection gradients. So the very fact that they were able to predict this is itself evidence of natural selection. So I'm just going to take a quick drink here for Trojan Source. The Real DM Wing for $10 also says, here's $10 to remind you that turtles are the best tetrapod. I'm pretty sure you meant the best tetrapod. And look, I'm not going to dispute that, although I'm not willing to necessarily completely agree. But thank you very much, The Real DM. Again, selection gradients on the control islands, which is where the lizards were taken from, were around 0. Natural selection continued to ignore limb length on these islands. But on curly-tail islands, the story had changed. Natural selection was again operating, but this time in the opposite direction. Shorter-tailed lizards were now surviving better. Natural selection had completely reversed. We expected this to happen, but not nearly so quickly. Results documented natural selection within a generation, but not evolutionary change across generations. What does that even mean? The results documented natural selection within a generation, but not evolutionary change across generations. In fact, the 2 selection episodes on the curly-tailed islands pretty much canceled themselves out. So the net selection was around 0, but we didn't expect natural selection to continue to oscillate from positive to negative. Oh, okay. So every generation there would be measurable changes, but across multiple generations, because the selection pressures went back and forth, the net change over a long time tended towards 0. But also, by the fact that it's saying that there was natural selection within a generation, not within a lifetime, is already, again, a Trojan source. Chris McDaniels, who's been a member for 4 months, says, "Hi, Dapper, I love your channel. If you couldn't tell, keep up the good work." Well, thank you very much, Chris McDaniel, and I can tell because, well, remember. All right. Now the annuls, which, by the way, I'm going to take a drink, even though there's really no reason to. I'm just going to call it correct prediction, because when he said expert on what, my first answer was annul. I correctly identified, I think that's a subfamily of that lizard, and I'm proud of that, so I'm taking a drink for it. All right, now that the annuls were up in the bushes, they weren't coming back down. Curly-tailed lizards would see to that. Moving forward, we predicted natural selection would continue to favor shorter legs. Again, using selection gradients and natural selection as your predictor. Look forward to seeing whether brown annuls could evolve to become similar to the twig specialists in the Greater Antilles. Based on our previous experiments, you might be expecting me to tell you that our experiment was wiped out by a hurricane. But if that's what you're thinking, you're mistaken. A hurricane did not terminate the experiments. 2 hurricanes did. Oh, and so also, in addition to all of this, Randy has just been misciting what actually happened, because it wasn't in the wake of a hurricane that all this happened. All this happened, and then there were 2 hurricanes, which wiped out the lizards in question. Thanks, Randy, for lying more than you had to about this source. I'm just going to take another drink for Trojan source that I wasn't even expecting. This is a double Trojan source. It contradicts 2 of your claims, Randy. Astral Necomimi, there we go, for $1.99 says, AIG's members sure are members. Take another drink. I know what you mean by member. All right, so that's enough for that source for now. Yeah, it did not take long to find out that source directly contradicted Randy.
It's internal. You are not shaped and molded by your environment. This is the bottom line. If I were to stomp my feet, you are not passive modeling clay being shaped by your environment in a wild, chaotic, unpredictable way. This is what you're taught, and it is absolutely, totally, 100% wrong.
Would have been nice if a single one of your sources supported that claim, wouldn't it, Randy?
And it is misleading. And it is misleading for one point to get you to not think in terms of a creator. But what creatures are is this, and these are the words I like you to write down and memorize. Creatures are active, problem-solving entities. Creatures are active, problem-solving entities.
I mean, I do technically agree with that. Most organisms do actively solve problems. Just doesn't lead to evolutionary change like you need it to, Randy. All right, Inkboy, who's been a member for 12 months, wow, at the tetrapod level, says, let's not forget that Godzilla loves pelagic tunicates. He probably just eats them without even noticing, but okay. Take a drink. You guys and your love of pelagic tunicates is disgusting.
That are able to detect the challenges, solve the challenges, and fill the earth. Does that make sense? Creatures are what? Active, problem-solving entities that are able to detect the challenges, solve the challenges, and fill the earth. What happened after the fall was the consequences of not solving.
Okay, we're going to skip ahead to David Reeves because I cannot continue to listen to this guy repeat himself. So we're just going to skip right ahead.
The challenges got worse. But before the fall,
but first, Inkboy upgraded his membership to Amnio. Thank you very much, Inkboy. I really appreciate that. Everybody, send some tetrapod emojis to welcome Inkboy to an upgraded membership level.
Solve challenges and you could still fill the earth. Got pictures can.
Oh yeah,
him.
David Reeves has his own intro
come on
video.
in. Our next speaker is David.
This is okay. So I previewed this like while I was like making coffee on like ×2 speed just to see what the heck was like. Is this actually even worth talking about? I don't remember exactly what he says. I just remember thinking, yeah, most of this is fine to talk about. It's mostly not preaching, but I do remember he had this weird cringy intro video. I kind of want to watch it.
Reeves, I'd like to. I looked at his bio and I said, "This is too much. Don't you have a video or something?" And so
revealing God.
his bio and I said, "This is too much. Don't you have a video or something?" And so he said, "Yes." So we have a video. Let's watch that and then welcome David Reeves.
David Reeves has devoted his life to researching and revealing God's fingerprints of design throughout the universe.
Why is it so much louder than it was before? Also, remember, this is what David Reeves sent about himself. So while he's not the one who's voicing this video, we can be well assured that this is his voice, ultimately. These are his words.
As president of the largest media ministry in the world...
So there you go. David Reeves, according to David Reeves, is the president of the largest media ministry in the world. I'm going to have a big old citation for that one, which, where the heck did my citation video? Oh, there it is. Yeah. Sorry, David. I'm going to need a citation on that one. Of course, the video is hung up because for some reason OBS hates me. Hey, OBS. Oh, almost. There it is. Thanks, OBS. Thanks for doing your job. Literally have one job, and you only sometimes do it. But thanks, I guess.
Focusing on origin science, David uses his signature combination of science and history to make the Bible and Christianity come alive. His weekly TV show, Creation with David Reeves, airs to hundreds of millions globally on TBN.
Airs to hundreds of millions globally? I'm pretty sure what that means is hundreds of millions of people have devices which get the channels that carry his program. Pretty sure that's what that means, which I'll buy. Do hundreds of millions watch David Reeves? Probably not, because most people I've talked to, even creationists, barely even know who he is.
Expert in science and the Bible, David has authored...
We're just going to take a drink for the idea that David Reeves is proclaiming himself an expert in the Bible and science, which I'm sure, as we'll find out, is a bit of an exaggeration. I'll put it that way. Okay, here we go.
2 books and is seen every day on TV with appearances on the History Channel, DirecTV.
I want to know what he was on the History Channel. Was it Ancient Aliens, guys? Come on.
TBN, CBN, Newsmax, Dr. James Dobson's Radio, and many more.
You know, with a resume like that, I think we all know what we're in for.
Garnering millions of views on social platforms, including Facebook, TikTok, and YouTube, David's #1 goal is to impact those he meets with incredible accounts of discovery, biblical accuracy, and science. He shows us that each person is wonderfully made with purpose, a biological miracle from our designer. An award-winning producer, documentary director, and TV host, David has become the most prominent voice for origin science in our age.
The most I cannot believe... Okay. I'm trying to put this in a way that isn't as vulgar as what I initially thought of, which involved doing things to oneself orally. I cannot believe how incredibly self-congratulatory this is. We'll put it that way. I think you guys can imagine to yourself what I initially thought of. Also, the real DM wing for $2 says, wow, 2 books. I mean, to be fair, that's 2 more books that I've ever written out. How many books have I written again? Yeah, 0. I guess I've contributed to 1 book. You know, Elron Teller gifted 1 Dapper Dinosaur membership, which went to Kit. So we will take a drink and then send some, not pelagic tuna kit emojis, tetrapod emojis, to welcome Kit. Okay. But yeah, you guys can use your imagination on what I was initially thinking.
As an adventurer, David leads dinosaur days.
He's an adventurer. He goes onto private ranches and just digs in the dirt for dinosaur bones. That's not what I would call an adventure.
Photo safaris to Africa. Expeditions into the Grand Canyon. Tours of his museum in Tennessee. Geology trips to national parks. Speaking tours in Great Britain.
Savage Cobra, kind of official for $2, says, all the unheard superlatives. Yeah, basically. You listen to this guy's thing and you would think this is the most famous creationist who's ever lived, and then you talk to real people and they're like, David who?
Films for television, and shares the gospel to millions along the way. David's signature phrase for the past 14 years of ministry has been Psalm 19:1. The heavens declare the glory of God. And now, David Reeves.
Okay, I just gotta say, this whole thing gives me super strong, like, Scientology get-together vibes. You ever seen, like, those leaked videos that come about, and they're talking about, like the time that, Tom Cruise won the made-up award that they made up just for Tom Cruise that one year and have never given to anyone else ever before or since. And they play this whole thing about how Tom Cruise is reaching millions with LRH technology. His mission has already reached more than any other Scientologist, but he's not done yet. Now, please welcome to the stage, Tom Cruise. And then everyone's like, yeah! And then he gives some kind of crazy off-the-hinge speech about how he's the only one who can ever help anyone, and how maybe someday all the suppressive people will be gone and you'll just read about them in history books. I'm getting strong, that kind of vibes. This just feels like a self-congratulatory Scientology propaganda video, and it's hilarious and also makes me want to drink more. Also, Vandali 1998 for $4.99 US says Dapper is the most prominent voice of dinosaurs, debunking why young Earth creationists stirs. Yeckers? Yeckers, remember Yeckers. As far as I know, at least. Thank you. Also, Savage Cobra, kinda official, says this guy is discount Ron Wyatt. Oof. Oh, man. That is savage. That's how you earned your name, Savage Cobra, right there. Oh, yeah, that's rough. I would never want to be called Discount Ron Wyatt. Ouch. My goodness.
Hello, hello, hello. It is great to be here in California. I left Nashville, Tennessee yesterday, and it was actually nicer weather than it is here. Not expecting that. No. So my name is David Reeves. I'm from the Nashville, Tennessee area. I've lived there most of my life. I got started when I was about 17 years old taking photos of space, and then I realized that I could use those photos to share God's glory with many, many people. And that's what we've been doing ever since. So today,
I just want to point out that at no point in that self-congratulatory thing did he at any point talk about astrophotography, and that's what he's leading with. Just a little weird.
I want to talk to you very quickly, we have a limited amount of time, about a topic I call wonders without number. Now, there's a passage in the book of Job. How many of you know that Job's going through a really difficult time? Yeah.
Okay, wait, we have to ask. The Creationist asked a question, so we're going to start a poll. In the book of Job, was Job... Come on, capitalize the J. There we go. Was Job having a bad time? Yes, no, and of course, the obligatory turtles. Okay, here we go.
Yeah. So there's a passage in the book of Job that says that God does great things past finding out and wonders without number. And I'm chewing over this thought one day.
I really want to know who told him that talking like a news anchor was a good idea. Now, I'll admit, I have a little bit of a news anchor-y, non-regional diction thing when I do my recorded videos. But, like, this guy sounds like a stereotypical news reporter just ripped right out of a cartoon.
And I realized, you know what? How true is that? God has done great things past finding out. There are things in
Alright, we're going to skip ahead a little bit because I don't really care about his interpretation of Job.
that verse says, admire, or we can say, in astronomy wrote the foreword to it. I called it wonders without number. God's wonders, his infinite number of wonders, starting with animal biology. We'll talk a little bit about wonders of mathematics, wonders in the universe, and then end with the ultimate wonder.
The wonders in mathematics thing always confuses me a little bit, because at a fundamental level, mathematics was invented by humans. It's a creation of human minds. Now, it's a useful invention that helps us describe how the universe works in an orderly and predictable way, but fundamentally, it's still a thing that humans made up. It's not the creation of anything besides humans. Now, at first, it was done with the help of a semi-empirical method, where you noticed that certain things were measurable and that you could find mathematical relationships between those measurements. But fundamentally, the rules of mathematics are things that humans made up. So, yeah, it's a little weird.
I want to begin by talking about wonders in animal biology with one of my favorite examples on planet Earth. I call it God's little wonder. It's the hummingbird. Several years ago, I was actually out in San Antonio, Texas, at a very largest Christian film festival in the world. Oh. One of my documentaries had made it to semi-finalist at this thing, and so
I gotta say, I can't imagine how cringy a Christian film festival is. First, I want to pour myself next beverage here. And then I'm going to talk about why I think that. So, one of the problems is, look, I'm not someone who's going to say that Christianity has not inspired great works of art, right? It obviously has. A huge portion of the best architecture and art of both, Europe, West and East Europe, and even in some cases the Near East, things like Hagia Sophia and whatnot, have been inspired by Christianity. Christianity is one of the reasons why Western music is the way it is. It has some of the greatest music in history. I'm a big fan of a lot of Christian art. However, the Christian branded nonsense that comes out of modern evangelical Protestantism is mostly just cringy crap that only makes money because it's branded Christian and they have a super saccharine version of Christian theology going through it. That's it. Most quote-unquote Christian music that is produced now is just terrible. Most Christian films are terrible. Look at God's Not Dead. That's terrible. You can make a good movie that is Christian themed, has themes about things like faith and God and Jesus or something, without making it so horribly on the nose as is the average quote-unquote Christian movie. The problem is you're probably not going to label it as a Christian movie. You could make the argument that the movie Signs by M. Night Shyamalan is a Christian movie. Now, it's not my favorite movie, but overall I like that movie, which is something I can't say for a lot of his movies. Now, granted, it has huge plot holes, and there's some ridiculous things, but it has a lot of Christian themes, and overall it's not a horrible movie. It's certainly not as bad as God's Not Dead. But no one is labeling it as a Christian movie. It didn't show at a Christian movie festival. I'm just going to say that, oh my goodness, I can't imagine how much I would hate going to a Christian movie festival that's showing what passes for Christian entertainment now. Vandelli, 1998, from 199 says, I wonder why someone gave him a platform. Oh, because Genesis Apologetics is here. And this is the best Genesis Apologetics can do. They can't get CMI or AIG because AIG and CMI don't want anything to do with the people who think that the mainstream explanation for dinosaur fossils is that literally every single dinosaur died as a direct result of the Chicxulub impact. Yeah, well, the Fearmonger says, VeggieTales is the only good overtly Christian media. I will die on that hill. I like the Chronicles of Narnia. That's the books. I thought those were fun books. Those are overtly Christian media. I like Handel's Messiah. The whole thing is really good as far as I'm concerned. That's explicitly Christian media. I'm actually a pretty big fan of both Byzantine and Gregorian chant. It's very relaxing and peaceful. That's explicitly Christian. There's a lot of really great explicitly Christian stuff out there. Just most of it isn't made by 20th and 21st century evangelical Protestants.
I flew out there with this package of DVDs. Remember this a few years ago before everything was digital. So I had this huge
Yes, because nowadays he'd fly out there with a packet of, like, USB drives.
pack of DVDs in my suitcase. Well, at the end of the film festival, I realized that I hadn't
Okay, I don't care. Get to the sciencey parts.
given away. Grab the Adam, but you stuck a D is mine. We're of a documentary idea. And he said, David, I'm making a full feature-length documentary about hummingbirds, and I evolved. And he's like, no, hour and a half of the lot of interesting hour and a half
Okay, now we're probably getting to some actual fact claims about hummingbirds.
of the documentary talking about. Boy, was I be surprised, because as a result of filming that documentary, we got to really have a lot of interesting information shared, including slow motion photography, what you see on the screen here. You see, the hummingbird is the smallest bird on earth, the smallest of all warm-blooded creatures, yet it
The smallest of all warm-blooded creatures. Okay. That I'm not actually sure about. Let's find out. Okay, so we'll go with mass, right? By mass, that might actually be true. So let's find the smallest, we'll go lightest mammal. The lightest mammal is the Etruscan shrew with an average body mass of about 1.8 grams. Okay. I'm actually expecting that we'll find that, like, I believe the bumblebee hummingbird is the smallest hummingbird. Bumblebee hummingbird. Oh, wait, no. Bumblebee hummingbird. There we go. And then we'll get mass. Nope. 2.7 grams. Bumblebee hummingbird. Yeah. Okay, well, what's the smallest hummingbird? We'll just make sure. Smallest hummingbird is the bee hummingbird. Okay, hold on. Bee hummingbird. Wait, don't give me ounces. What is wrong with you, Google? Come on. Grams. Try mass, see what happens. Also ounces. Now I have to convert ounces into grams. What is this? All right, so it's 0.56 to 0.67, or, oh, sorry, 0.06. Take the lightest value just to be nice. So we'll say 0.056 ounces to grams. 1.5. Okay, so that's the light end. So the light end of the bee hummingbird's mass is about the same as the Etruscan shrew's average mass, which means their average masses are probably about the same, which means I'm going to go ahead and say that, at least as far as we can tell, the bee hummingbird is tied for smallest warm-blooded creature. Oh no, that ounces was ounces of mass. Well, ounces of weight, not fluid ounces. All right, here we go.
It can fly 34 miles per hour. It can fly forwards, backwards, side to side, hover, and at birth it weighs less than a Post-it note placed in the palm of your hand. That's pretty light.
Elephant TNT says, yay, Dapper likes a metric system. Yeah, so here's my rule for a measuring system. For like science topics and engineering, I vastly prefer the metric system. It's easier to do conversions. All the numbers are simpler. However, for day-to-day things like taking a walk or like cooking, I actually tend to prefer the sort of imperial system. Also, Jake Nelson, I missed this, for $5 says, I think we should change the language from getting drunk to getting dapper. I like it. Do it. So, like, yeah, I don't want to go on like a whatever 2.5 kilometer walk. I want to go on like a mile walk. I don't want to bake with like grams and milliliters or something. I want to use, you know, like, but if I'm measuring like, hey, what's the mass of this animal? Give it to me in grams or kilograms. Don't give me pounds and ounces. I don't care. If it's like, hey, what's the distance to like the sun? I don't care about the miles. I care about the kilometers, or I guess the AUs, but whatever. Yeah, like, oh, hey, how much force does this impact cause if you're calculating, like, you know, Newtonian physics? Give me newtons. Don't give me pounds of force. So, yeah. The NB is saying 0.69 ounces. So I saw a range that started with 0.056, then went to 6.9. I chose the lighter range to give him the best chance. Because I'm being generous. Dr. Tapioca Weasel says, you share the same weird perspective most of the U.S. scientific Americans, most of us scientific Americans have on the metric. Yeah. I mean, look, I recognize that my preference for imperial in terms of things like how far I walk or how to bake a cake is because of my life experience, how I grew up in America. Doesn't change it. Anyway.
Now that hummingbird, it will fly from flower to flower collecting nectar, and guess what? It can tell just by tasting the nectar what the sugar content is.
Oh! So, let's take a drink. For one, that's true. But also, hey guys, did you know that humans can tell just by tasting water how much sugar has been dissolved into it? It's called being able to taste sweet things. Like, what is this, a superpower to be able to taste sweetness and say, not sweet enough, go to someplace that's sweeter. This is not magic, right? Kids can do this. It's the reason that kids want to eat candy more than they want to eat vegetables. Even carrots, which are relatively sweet for vegetables. You give a kid a choice between a carrot and a pile of sugar-bearing candy, like a lollipop or something, they take the lollipop every time. Because apparently, by some miracle of creation, kids were designed to be able to detect sugar content in food. How is this even possible? Like, come on. This is ridiculous.
If it's less than 10% sugar, it says, oh, I've got to move to the next flower because less than 10% won't support my super fast metabolism. I'll die if I don't get any more than 10% sugar. So
hummingbirds have a minimum amount of sweetness that they think tastes good. That's literally all he's saying here. I mean, it's true. I'm just going to take a drink as to how dumb of a point it is, because of course they have standards in food. You do too, David Reeves. Yeah, Tesla Ranger says he probably thinks hummingbirds can figure out how many sugar molecules per cc. Which, like, they definitely can't. All they can tell you is, like, subjectively, this doesn't taste good enough, so I'm moving on. The wonders of hummingbirds. Knowing what sweet is. Oh, gee. How amazing. Also, I'm going to end this poll about, I don't even remember what the poll was about. Oh, Job. It was about Job. Okay. In the book of Job, was Job having a bad time? Turtles, 50%. Of course, correct. Yes, 45%. And no, 3%. I like those results. Okay, here we go.
It moves to the next flower. It collects that nectar. That's what gives it the energy to have a wing that is beating in a figure-8 pattern. Look at this.
This just in, everybody. Hummingbirds use food to power biological processes. I'll take another drink because it's both true and stupid, because all he's saying is, wow, did you know that hummingbirds are in fact animals? Yeah. Also, Inkboy says, why does your poll add up to 98%? The reason for that is because with 77 votes and only giving me whole numbers, basically the percentages are all not whole numbers, but YouTube is only going to give me whole numbers. So if you added up the stuff behind the decimal point YouTube is hiding, I don't know if they're truncating or if they're rounding, it would come out 200. But they're not giving us that. Thinkbox Dictator says, dogs can't taste sugar, therefore devil made them. I think you're thinking of cats who can't taste sugar. Because I'm pretty sure dogs can. I know for one thing that the dogs here do like sugar quite a bit. Whereas I've never met a cat who was very interested in just actual sugar.
Not up and down. It's in a figure-8 pattern like this.
Okay, that doesn't make it not up and down. It's still up and down. It's just that the tilt of the wing changes. Which again is just saying basically, hey, did you know that hummingbirds are flexible at the shoulder joint? Yes. And that they beat their wings way faster? Yes. And that they have a particular pattern to their wings, which helps them do things like hover and fly backwards? Again, yes, it's pretty cool. I'm not going to say it's not pretty cool, but I'm not sure what the point is. Like, why is... I mean, look, if you have neat, therefore God, on your bingo list, absolutely check that off, because that's all this is hey, hummingbirds are neat, therefore evolution is false, and it must be God. Which is not an argument.
80 times per second.
Whoa.
You know the I looked it up. I got curious the other day. I looked it up. Fastest drummer in the Guinness World Book of Records. I think it was something like 10 beats per second. And the hummingbird is flapping its wings in a figure 8, 80 times per second. 80 times. 80 times.
Yeah, we'll take a drink. That's true. This is all true and cool. And this is actually remarkable, unlike hummingbirds can taste sweetness.
80 times. You know what? To be able to do that, its heart has to be running at around 1,200 beats per minute. Now, guys, if our heart beats a couple...
Oh, hey, drink for Mothra. Mothra stopped in. Thanks, Mothra. Savage Cobra, kinda official, for $5 says, I changed my mind. This is discount Carl Baugh after a public speaking class. Oof, is that worse than Ron Wyatt? Oh, I don't know. I mean, it's a different kind of specificity. Like, you're specifying a slightly different kind of loon. I'm just not sure if it's worse or better. I wouldn't want to be either. But yeah, he's definitely got more speaking ability than Carl Baugh. Carl Baugh, like, is... I think he just sniffed too many of his own farts, and now, like, the language processing center of his brain is just shot. Because it's just full of, like, methane and methylmercaptan or something like that. And that's why he can't talk like a human. Seriously, I've said it many, many times. If you put Carl Baugh up against, like, ChatGPT, like a Turing test, where you get ChatGPT's text responses on one side, Carl Baugh's on the other, you would pick ChatGPT as the real human, like, every single time over Carl Baugh. Because Carl Baugh is just a pile of nonsense. Literal nonsense. Like, he says things that aren't even sentences. That aren't even, like, attempts at thought. There's just a word salad somewhere in there, and, like, he links together some things with prepositions or, like, conjunctions. And then, like there's no main verb, there's no, like, subject or anything. It's just a bunch of noun phrases all linked together willy-nilly.
100 beats per minute, we probably ought to be headed to the emergency room because something's gone wrong. But the hummingbird is designed to have that fast of a heartbeat so that it can hover.
Designed. That's going to be presuming facts, not in evidence right there.
Now, guess what? This is a huge, massive problem for evolution.
Is it? Animal beats heart faster seems like a thing that evolution can do. Animal has instinct to beat wing in a slightly different pattern seems like a thing evolution can do. Animal taste sugar is already a thing that evolution did well before there were hummingbirds. Interesting. Also, here's a curious thing about hummingbirds. Hummingbirds are basically just taking bees and trying to make birds into bees. Why bother? Why not just have more bees? This is one of the things where, the real Debunking for $5 says, do a Carl Baugh. I've done a Carl Baugh, at least once. It's way back in my catalog. I might do more Carl Baugh. The problem is that most of his stuff is, like, kind of boring. And also, Logic has covered so much of it that I don't want to, like, retread a lot of that ground. But I'll tell you what, if you guys have, like, a particular Carl Baugh video that you'd like me to cover, send it to me. And I'll take a look at it. We might be able to do it for a Dapper Reacts or maybe even a video series. I just finished a 4-part video series. Like today, it went up for early access earlier today. So I am going to be starting to look for the next videos to cover. So, oh, hey, Thomas Gallipoli says a cockatiel's heart beats over 900 times a minute. And so what? Is that true? That's a lot. That's a whole lot. I feel like I need a citation for that. Kind of crazy. I lost my train of thought. We'll keep going. Oh, bees, right. So, when creationists see similar design, right, they're like, oh, it's the same designer. Okay, well, does that mean that the existence of bees that pollinate and bats that pollinate and hummingbirds that pollinate indicate at least 3 different pollination designers? Because that's different design. Because bees, bats, and birds all fly in very different ways. So, different design, different designer? But they never say that. No. Can't have different designers. Because, look, this is never actually about design. It's about getting their theological point of monotheistic religion across. There's only one designer. Or if you want to argue that the Trinity isn't strictly monotheistic and it's some tritheistic thing, all right, great. I don't care about that argument and say it's a tritheistic creator, but they'll still say that they all work in concert. So ultimately, it comes down to basically just one will creating. So whatever. Here we go.
Because the second that hummingbird settles down, the very first night that it settles down and it doesn't get a continual source of energy, it should die. It has
That first hummingbird, we're going to take a drink for assuming that there's such a thing as the first hummingbird. As if some sparrow laid an egg and out popped a hummingbird, which we all know is not how evolution works. Okay.
to continually go from flower to flower, collecting that sugar, collecting that energy in order to sustain itself. So it should die the first night that it goes to sleep. But guess what? It doesn't. We still see hummingbirds today, don't we?
Yes. You know what? I'm thirsty. I'm taking a drink for it. It's true. I don't even care. Oh my goodness.
We know something happens, and now we know what happens.
Oh, was this a recent discovery?
It's called torpor. And torpor, when the hummingbird settles down at night, it reduces the hummingbird's metabolism from 1/15 to 1/15 of its normal metabolism, and it slows its heart from 1,200 beats per minute to 35 beats per minute.
It's a lot.
And the next morning, that heart, it starts to speed back up until finally it reaches 1,200 beats per minute, and then it flies away as if nothing ever happened.
Okay, so all animals slow their metabolic rate and their heart rates down when they sleep. All of them. You do it. I do it. Your dog does it. Your cat does it. Your goldfish does it. Whales do it. Sharks do it. Everybody does this. What he's saying is, yeah, but the hummingbird does it a lot, though. To which I say, okay. Also, there's this implication that, like, oh, how could the hummingbird evolve? Because it has to be able to go into an extreme level of torpor or it'll die. Well, when the first birds started evolving in the direction of hummingbirds, they didn't have crazy 1,200 beat per minute heartbeats. They had more normal heartbeats for small birds that maybe would 400 or 500. Then when they went to sleep, that probably slowed down to like 100 or 200. That big a deal. And they weren't subsisting purely on nectar because they weren't quite hummingbirds yet. But as they specialized for being small, agile, nectarvorous specialists, their metabolism started to increase slowly, their size started to shrink slowly, and the difference between their resting and their active metabolisms increased, again, all slowly, all in tandem, because evolution doesn't work like a set of Legos where you complete one feature and then you bolt it on to the main thing you're working on, and then you have to start the next feature. It doesn't work like that. The size, the metabolism, the flight patterns all co-evolve together given consistent directional selection. The same thing with the giraffe neck, right? Creationists will say, oh, how could the giraffe have evolved its long neck? Its brains would explode without the check valves in its neck that stops, the super high pressure blood from getting to the brain when it leans down to take a drink. Well, giraffes evolved these things in tandem with their long neck. As their necks became long enough that some kind of pressure reduction was useful, but not necessary, that's when they would start evolving the first instances of these things that increase head loss in one direction when the head is lowered. And eventually, they got to the point where they became full check valves as the neck grew long enough to need them. It doesn't all have to happen one thing at a time. In fact, this is such a basic part of evolution that it's in Origin of the Species by Darwin, right? Like, this is one of the things Darwin got right. He responded to this very objection way back in the 1850s. So, yeah. Oh, and hey, Skeletor over 9,000. You got a bingo? Very nice. All right, here we go.
That is just one of the hummingbird's infinite number of wonders that enables it.
Okay, hold on. Let's read some of these. 80 wing beats per second, already covered it. 2 fovea for focus. I mean, I don't know if that's true. It sounds cool, but I don't see why having a second spot of really concentrated photoreceptors in your eyes is something that evolution can't do. Hovering flight, already covered it. Built-in GPS, I'm pretty sure that the Hummingbird isn't getting GPS coordinates. However, I'm sure it does have some kind of spatial recognition system, which again, pretty common in animals. Figure 8 wing pattern, covered it. Torpor, covered it. Sugar percentage gauge, again, it's just taste. I'm sorry, I cannot get over what a big deal he's making over, did you know that hummingbirds can taste sweetness? Oh, I'm taking another drink for it. I just can't. The amazingness that hummingbirds know what sweetness is. Refracted color, that's actually common to birds generally. That's not specific for hummingbirds, so it's weird that it's here. Solo migration, I mean, and lots of animals migrate solo. Efficient tongue, I mean, hey. Feathers grow in matched pairs. Again, that's just birds. That's not hummingbirds. It's just birds. It's also just bilateral symmetry. I don't know if you guys know, but birds are bilaterians. They have left and right halves that are basically the same. You know, it's a thing. It's common to clams, squid, ants, birds. It's even common to like larval starfish. Kind of a thing. All right, here we go.
To exist, to survive, and to thrive in God's creation. Now, what would happen if the hummingbird had to evolve this mechanism over millions of years?
Which mechanism, man? You talked about too many things to just say this mechanism. This isn't even like a creation evolution thing. This is just a basic language, right? When you've listed a whole bunch of things, especially if you just put a whole bunch of things on a television screen, and then you just use like a relative pronoun to refer to something, this thing, that's what relative pronouns are, this, that, those, these. It's not clear what you're talking about. Have clear antecedents. Keep in mind what your speakers likely know. That's called pragmatics. English pragmatics assumes that your speakers do not already have information that you haven't given them. There are languages that don't make that assumption, and if you're speaking one of those languages, then feel free to just say this and wait for a question. But you're speaking English, man. Use English pragmatics.
It wouldn't have lasted past the first night, would it?
Okay, it's the torpor. Yes, if evolution said that first hummingbirds evolved completely anatomically as they are now, complete with a really fast active metabolism, but they did not at any point during that entire time concurrently increase the degree to which their metabolisms decrease as they sleep, which again is a thing that happens to all animals. Well, okay, so like maybe not sponges and jellyfish, but like go with like, I don't know, all bilaterians at least. I don't know about jellyfish or ctenophores or sponges, so maybe not to them. But like, this is a thing that happens to like bilaterians broadly. They all rest and have their metabolisms go down. So yeah, if the evolutionary theory would predict that first they evolved into hyper-fast nectivorous bumblebee birds, and they couldn't do torpor to the degree to which they do, then yes, they would die. Good thing that's not what anyone in evolutionary biology thinks, because that, again, is just ignoring something so basic that we already had figured out in the 1850s.
Well, what if somehow this hummingbird could evolve this feature over only 100 years? It wouldn't last past the first night, would it?
Yes, it would, because as it's evolving that, it hasn't evolved the same degree of high metabolism. I'm taking a drink for... We cannot get the very basics of evolutionary biology right, even though they've been the basics of evolutionary biology the whole time. Like, literally 170 years. Coming up on 200 years soon. Most of you will live to see the 200th anniversary of the answer to this objection.
What if somehow it could will itself to evolve over just a week's period of time, the ability to slow its heart down? So
again, that's not what happens. Individuals don't evolve, populations evolve. Take a drink for David Reeves thinking that evolution is about individuals changing their adult morphology throughout the course of their lives. It's not. Is Sal still here? Sal, I want you to explain to me, if you're here, or if you hear this later and you want to talk to me about it. Why did you think that this would be a guy whose work you should associate yourself with? Like, you wouldn't even catch Answers in Genesis saying this stuff, right? Like, I would be shocked if you said this. I'd be shocked if Peter from Paleologo said this. I'd be shocked if Todd Wood said this. I'd be shocked if anyone from CMI said this. I wouldn't be shocked if anyone from ICR or Genesis Apologetics or Dave Reeves said it, or Kent Hovind said it. But yeah. If you're watching this, Sal, let me know. Please. I want to know why you wanted to be associated with this guy.
So it could last the night. It would not survive. That kind of mechanism, that type of engineering has to be built inside of the creature from day one.
Jessica for $1.99 says AIG is a bag of Kent Hovinds. Awesome. I'll take a drink for that. Now, I know that we've gone over the normal, like, halfway point break time, and I haven't taken a break. I don't feel like I currently need one. So yeah, I'm just going to keep going until I run out of this beverage, and then I'll take a quick drink, assuming that we haven't finished out the thing, because I brought 2 cans. The Sealoof for 50 sex, always appreciate getting the sex, says, and I'm going to get this wrong, because the only Germanic languages I'm even vaguely familiar with are like Anglo-Saxon, Modern English, Middle English, and a little bit of German, so bear with me. But Svari Snur Getter Aren Silkesak Stopped Medsura Sega Lemmiga South. Okay, hold on. South Patrons the Snowpar? With a Mothra and a drink emoji, and I'm pretty sure that was an AIG is a bag of dicks message, but like, I don't know. And yeah, every once in a while, people are like, oh, you should just learn how to pronounce all these languages. And I'm like, guys, I can barely remember how to pronounce all the languages that I've bothered to study even a little bit. I'm not going to get all of them. It's just not going to happen. You're just going to have to deal with it.
This points to an infinite, loving, knowing God who created this hummingbird with purpose.
Okay, so ichneumanoid wasps. Ichneumanoidea is a group that encompasses a couple families. The thing they all have in common is that they all use their ovipositors to sting living animals and inject their eggs into them, which then grow as parasitoid maggots inside the living organism, often a caterpillar, which then eats that organism from the inside so that they can get enough calories to puke. If the fact that hummingbirds can undergo torpor to a greater extent than other animals points to a loving God who cared so much for the hummingbird, does that mean that same God just really hates caterpillars? What did caterpillars do to God that he would make ichneumanoid wasps that are obligate parasitoids on caterpillars? Really? Vandalia 1998 says, is the reason they think it's individuals because it's one of the members of the population that has a new mutation that survives long enough to have kids with the rest of the population? I don't think that's the reason. I think it's because they deeply must understand the very basic aspect of evolutionary. They basically, when it comes to evolutionary biology, they have trouble getting up to like a middle school level of understanding, in part because I think a lot of them just didn't go to schools that teach evolutionary biology, which, to be fair, even like, you know, good public schools only do an okay-ish job of doing that. And because they don't care to learn. Oh yeah, and the Sealoof says that God hates Greenland sharks. Yeah. Why is there an entire species of shark that all go blind almost none of them make it like past a few years of adulthood without going blind because of a parasitic worm that burrows into their eyeballs and eats it from the inside? What did Greenland sharks do? Like, it's all fine and good to say, oh, hey, this really cool thing that keeps this one organism alive indicates that God loves these creatures. Okay, well, what about all the horrible things that they have to put up with? What does that indicate? Does God hate them? And if the answer is no, well, then I'm going to have to say then it's just special pleading that you're pointing out the cool things about them and saying that means that God loves them. So, and Damien McLagan says, caterpillars evolve like Pokemon, Dapper Dinosaur. I mean, basically, yeah, because evolution for Pokemon is more like ontogenetic change than it is like actual evolution. And, going from an egg to a caterpillar to a whatever kind of pupa, whether it be a chrysalis or in a cocoon or whatever, to an adult lepidopteran is way more like Pokemon evolution than actual evolution is.
But you know what? There are several different ways at looking at that same hummingbird. Our thoughts, our expectations, our worldviews, our actions, it depends on the way we look at things. And evolutionary theory is actually a naturalistic creation account that is opposed to what we find in the book of Genesis, the book.
It's naturalistic in a way that science is methodologically natural, right? Like evolution doesn't bother to account for God, but also it doesn't account for angels, demons, ghosts, goblins, elves, witches, any of those things. Right? Oh, is it a copepod savage cobra that burrows into the Greenland shark eyes? My apologies to all the crustacean boys out there. I thought it was a worm. I was wrong. Apparently it's a copepod. That is a kind of crustacean. So yeah, calling evolution a naturalistic, like it's not more naturalistic than like the theory of universal gravitation or the germ theory of disease. Yeah, the germ theory of disease doesn't hold open the possibility that your infected cut is the result of demons coming in and cursing your cut finger. And I don't know what you want from me, right? Should we, instead of the germ theory of disease, which has demonstrated itself to be useful in medicine, to make good predictions about future data, be able to be used to develop new treatments, should we pretend that it doesn't work? Because some people would prefer that cuts be divine judgments or curses from demons. Or sorry, infections would be divine curses. Yeah, divine curses or whatever from demons. I don't think that's a good reason to reject the germ theory of disease. However, apparently, the fact that the unifying theory of modern biology doesn't have a whole lot to say about gods or demons or angels or ghosts or werewolves or goblins is some kind of a problem now.
Of beginnings, because the book of Genesis tells us that God created all creatures, at least the families of creatures, the basic kinds.
Oh, the Bible says that God created the families in the Bible. That's interesting. So let's double check. Okay, so we're gonna just check. Just when was Genesis compiled? It wasn't written as a single work. 5th and 6th centuries BC. Okay. Now, the taxonomic family was invented by Carolus Linnaeus. So, when was Systema Naturae? We'll go with written, right? Because obviously those ideas had been invented before it was published. So we'll go with written. 1735. Now that's AD 1735. Interesting. That's over 2,000 years after. So, where in the Bible do you actually get the idea that the taxonomic rank of family, which Linnaeus invented in the 18th century, 1700s, where do you get that from the Bible? If anyone can find me the Bible verse that tells us that the kinds are at the family level, or even that kinds are the unit of creation, I would be very curious to see what book that's in. So I'm just going to take a drink for David Reeves just making up fake facts about the Bible.
Of creatures fully functioning. So you see Charles Darwin back in the 1800s, he was studying to become a pastor when he realized he liked collecting.
Okay, he was going to get a divinity degree because his dad wanted him basically to become a parson. But to say that Charles Darwin was, his purpose in studying was to become a priest in the Anglican Church, which again, not the same thing as a Protestant pastor. He was going to become, if he had followed that career path, he would have become an Anglican priest. Same thing. But he didn't have any intention of that. That's pretty clear from both what his friends said about him, as well as his own self-reporting of his own life. He had no interest in joining the clergy. It's just that that's the degree that basically his dad was paying for. Because remember, Darwin came from an aristocratic family. When you were an aristocrat, you didn't really get like a regular job. You lived off of your family's holdings, and whoever was in charge of your family's holdings was the one who held the purse strings for the whole family. And if you went and got a regular old job, that was considered to be unacceptable for someone who was as aristocratic as Darwin. Like if Darwin had gone and got a job as like a blacksmith or a tailor or something, he would have been, like ostracized from the society he grew up in. I'm not here defending this aspect of 19th century British culture. I think it's rather silly. But like, yeah, Darwin was doing what he had to do, which was get this degree he didn't really want. That's why he spent most of his time studying the natural world instead of studying theology.
Beetles more than he liked his pastoral studies, so
Yeah.
you know what? He jumped on the HMS Beagle and he traveled to the Galapagos Islands. Have we all heard about the Galapagos Islands?
I mean, that's skipping over a lot of significant stuff, but sure, he did do that.
There he saw finches, and those finches showed adaptation. There were finches with
Well, they were tanagers, not finches, but everyone calls them finches, so I'll let it go.
large beaks, small beaks.
Oh, hey, Mothra's back. We'll take another drink for Mothra. Thanks, Mothra. Okay.
Different colorations, and he said, wow, it looks like all of these birds are able to adapt to whatever island they're on to fit whatever they're designed to fit. Dr.
No, if they're adapting, then they weren't designed for it. Because if you were designed for it, you wouldn't need to adapt, right? Like, your car doesn't need to adapt to moving forward when you press the accelerator. That's what it's designed to do. If you needed to do something else, like fly, well, then there's going to need to be some adaptations made.
Randy Galuza just spoke about this amazing engineering principle that is actually inside of the creature.
Yeah, but all of his sources directly contradicted his points, so like... And Mothra's back again, my goodness. Someone's trying to make me drunk. Which actually means I need to do something about that real quick. Okay. Heading back.
Okay, so what he did was he saw something that was real, that was observable, that was repeatable.
Wallace, welcome to the channel as a member at the tetrapod level. Everybody, send some tetrapod emojis to welcome Wallace to the channel. All right, here we go.
That was empirical.
Oh, also, Jacob Ostapowicz, how I'm going to pronounce it for now, is in the chat. Jacob, if you would like to have a discussion about this, feel free to come on, man. Yeah, or if you have specific questions, you can super chat them. I don't have any interest in engaging with you because you're a known coward who won't come on the channel to discuss. Instead, you'd like to hide in the comments most of the time. But hey, change my mind, and I will retract that by just setting up a time for us to actually have a discussion. If you want, we can have Jackson Wheat there or not. He's usually who I talk to Creationists with, mostly because we can fill in each other's gaps of knowledge and various things. Feel free to check out my other Chatting with Young Earth Creationist videos to see how that'll usually go. We're usually quite polite. We're not combative. We're not jerks. Or, continue to make yourself appear to be a coward by, not ever actually bothering to come on the channel. That's an option too.
That was good science, and then he took it just a little bit too far.
Uh-oh.
Yeah, he said, well, if animals can adapt in such a way, maybe we could give it millions and millions of years and turn an ape-like creature into a human or a bird and
turn an ape-like creature that's an ape into an ape. That sure does seem far-fetched. Sure.
To an ape or an amoeba into an astronaut.
No, amoebozoa is not ancestral to metazoa, which is animals broadly, including the sponges and the ctenophores and the cnidarians and the, anything else, bilaterians and whatnot. Amoebozoa is in fact its own branch that has its own highly derived trait. So I will take a drink for just basically using amoeba as a stand-in for any single-celled eukaryote, which is extremely dumb. Yeah, Savage Cobra kind of official says Dapper Dinosaur hasn't eaten anybody with those sharp teeth in a couple months. Yeah, I avoid eating the humans when I can. Also, I'm still seeing about 30 people who haven't hit the like button. Please do hit the like button. It really helps the channel.
See, he took something too far. He had a credibility problem, by the way. I don't know if y'all know this, but in the closing comments of his book on the origin of species by means of natural...
By a credibility problem, I'm pretty sure he just means Darwin had to convince people he was right with his new ideas. Which is kind of how new ideas work. So, I guess you could call that a credibility problem, but that's just, hey, I came up with something new that no one accepts yet. Maybe I should be convincing about it.
Selection or the preservation of favored races. Yes, Darwin was a racist.
Hey, fun fact. The origin of species, or the preservation of favored races in the struggle for survival, doesn't mention human races even once, but it does talk about races of cabbages and races of pigeons. So, would Darwin be a racist by today's standards? Yeah, almost certainly. Also, Thomas Gallipoli was gifted a membership by Dr. Tapioca Weasel, so we will take a drink for that. And guys, get in your tetrapod emojis. No pelagic tunican emojis, guys. I want to scare people away. So, in The Descent of Man, in which Darwin does talk about the origin of the human species, the various quote-unquote races, then you might have a point, but of course that book's title doesn't even use the word race. So, was Darwin a racist? Yeah, he thought that different races of humans, one, were a real biological fact, which they're not, and that two, some of them were more advanced or smarter or more capable than others. So yeah, by today's standards, he was absolutely a racist. However, he was also an abolitionist at a time when it was not yet popular to be an abolitionist. Or at least it wasn't the default thing. He wasn't the only abolitionist, right? But like, he was someone who was against the global slave trade, which was already pretty progressive for his time. He actually wrote very favorably about some of the enslaved individuals that he met during his travels in writing about how terrible slavery was. So for his time, Darwin was significantly less problematic than most people were. So just harping on Darwin was a racist, okay, great. Even if he were the worst racist in all of history, that wouldn't make any of his ideas wrong. And as it turns out, for his time, he's about as good as we could reasonably ask for an aristocratic British man. Because let's be honest, if anyone has an excuse to have motivations to be extra racist, it's aristocratic British men in the 19th century. And yet, despite that, he was a staunch abolitionist. So there you go. But also, again, his character really doesn't matter to the truth of the various claims that he made. And really, since we're, 170-something years out from the time that he was making these claims, it doesn't really matter because no one's basing current science on Darwin's ideas. Dr. Tapioca Weasel has gifted one more membership, which went to Bree. So everyone, get in those emojis, the tetrapod emojis, and I'll take another drink for welcoming Bree. All right, here we go.
Charles Darwin actually wrote, "There's grandeur in this view of life, with its several powers having been originally breathed by the Creator." What?
Oh no!
Did Charles Darwin just acknowledge a creator?
Yeah, at the time that he wrote the first edition of The Origin of Species, probably the case that he was at least leaning towards there being a god. It's possible. And we know that eventually he ended up becoming probably an atheist. He had an agnostic phase too. But he had a theistic phase and a deistic phase. Not really remarkable.
It seems like it. And yet, he later admitted in a private work, he said, "I long regretted that I truckled to public opinion and used this pentateuchal term of creator, by which I really meant appeared by some wholly unknown."
Al Trucker says, confused, is he saying the word races is racist? No, I think he's saying that combined with the phrase favored races, as if certain races were better. Now, of course, even if you were talking about human races, who would this be favored by? Not by humans, but by natural selection, which would basically just mean that certain groups were better adapted to the current circumstances in which they find themselves in terms of the environment. Which is not to say that they're morally better or more capable in all environments or anything like that. It's just to say that they're currently maladapted. But it could sound racist if you were talking about humans when you made that point, which he wasn't. And which, again, even if he were, it's still not clear that that's actually racist. But saying favored races doesn't sound great in the context of humans. Okay.
Own process. Do you know what he's saying here? This is fancy words, but what it means is this. I'm from Tennessee. I like to break it down really simply. What he's saying is, I added the word creator in my book to sell more books.
Kinda. I don't think anyone was picking it up because the word creator was in there, so that's like... I think it was more just to avoid controversy. But ironically, controversy also sells books, so I'm not even sure that that makes sense.
To make it palatable for you to believe that if there's a creator involved, then surely evolution could have played a part. You see, this is the two-faced man that's looked up to as...
Hey, so this man isn't really looked up to. No one really... Okay, so that's not true. He is, but the thing is, ultimately, Darwin doesn't matter to modern science. Right? Darwin could have all of his writings erased. Everyone could forget his name. You could forget that he ever lived. Modern evolutionary biology would be unaffected. Science is not about great prophets. Darwin isn't a saint. He's not the Pope. He's not a great prophet of science. He's the first scientist to get some important aspects about evolution right. That's it. Right? Like, no one accepts Newton's laws of motion because of Newton. We accept them because they continue to be useful in everyday life, in engineering, in physics. Similarly, no one accepts evolution because Darwin said it. We accept it because there's mountains of evidence and it makes good predictions and is useful for telling us what new avenues of fruitful biological research will be. So, yeah.
Revolutionary in fields of science, and yet he had this credibility problem. Our top universities have long held a history of biblical origins. For instance, Yale was established in 1701 in an effort to train preachers. Their coat of arms to this day contains the biblical phrase Urim and Thummim, light and truth, written in Hebrew, by the way. And yet, today, if you go to the Yale Peabody Museum, you'll see the ascent from ape-like creature into mankind.
Yeah, none of which is incompatible with belief in God. Most theists are not anti-evolutionists. Oh, Olivia Williams received your glass from Paulogia yesterday. That is, Olivia Williams won a trivia competition over on Paulogia Live. I was there. I was also competing, but I did not do nearly as well as Olivia did. So congratulations on that. Liz D says, I accept evolution because the Dapper dinosaur said it. He is the vessel for all my adoration. Please don't make that me. I don't deserve that. I'm not bad, but I'm not all adoration deserving. But you know what? We're going to take a quick break while I get myself a new drink, and then we'll be right back for the last quarter or so of this. So please stick with us, and we will be right back. All right, I am back. Also, for $5, Vandalian1998 says, are you say famous scientists only start discoveries and others build upon it and we don't take original concepts as the be all and end all? Yes, that is exactly what I'm saying. And also, there was a Mothra emoji. So I will finish off my previous drink, in honor of that Mothra emoji. I'm going to crack open a cold one. Here we go. Yeah, that was a stupid way to pour. Oh well. Okay, here we go. Let's hit the play button.
Over millions and millions of years. If you have any doubt about it whatsoever, I just invite you to go up to the American Museum of Natural History in New York City, and guess what? Right there you can meet your relatives.
Okay.
It's not even taught as a theory.
It is taught as a theory, because here's the thing. What a theory is a well-supported body of thought that explains otherwise disparate data points and makes predictions which have and continue to come true in future data, and which, despite repeated possibilities for falsification, has yet to be falsified. Normally, in everyday parlance, things that meet that definition are just called facts, right? So, for instance, if you say, hey, did you know that all mass attracts all other mass within the observable universe, say? Yeah, that's just a fact. Now, that's also the conclusion of universal gravitation, which is a theory. If your doctor comes to you and says, hey, your symptoms are caused by an infection in your digestive tract of Streptococcus bacteria. Well, he got that from the germ theory of disease, but it's also a fact. Too Young to Feel This Old for $2 says, Aster says, hi, Dapper. Well, hi, Aster. I hope you're doing well. So, yeah, modern theories are, by and large, also what everyday people would call a fact. Now, in science, when you talk about what are the facts, you usually mean the data point. And theories are not facts and won't become facts in that sense. That's what the data points are. But in everyday parlance, yes, the theory of evolution is a fact. The theory of universal gravitation is a fact. The heliocentric model of the solar system, which is another theory, is a fact. So, yeah. Here we go.
This is fact. Oh, meet your relatives. They're right here. Look at these ape-like ascensions.
I mean, you're literally just showing chimpanzee and Neanderthal. Neanderthal is definitely a human relative by everyone's estimation, even creationists. And chimpanzees are not very human-like. They're very chimpanzee-like. But then again, they're as human-like as any other ape is. Considerably more so than any non-ape. Actually, they're more human-like. More closely related to humans than the other. Ignoring that for now.
You are nothing more than a highly evolved animal. That's what
I want to take a drink for, like, you're nothing more than, as if the be-all and end-all of human worth was their ancestry, or as if being an animal were a bad thing to be. Turns out that, one, you do not have to gain your self-worth or your value for human life on the basis of evolutionary biology. You can have all the philosophical reasons for that, or just emotional reasons for that you want. And two, what's wrong with being an animal? I like being an animal. I mean, would I rather be a fungus or a plant? No, not really.
what they're teaching millions upon millions of susceptible students walking through, and they're teaching it as fact.
Yeah, as they should.
What I like to say is, what effect does this belief of evolution really have on our faith?
On our fate or faith? What it has on your fate is, I mean, nothing really. First, if fate is a real thing, then you can't really affect it because it's fated. That's how fate works. But next, if you mean faith, I mean, the vast majority, I don't know about vast, but the majority of theists who are in fact not anti-evolutionists seem to be doing just fine with their faith. So I don't see how it has an obvious effect on either.
Well, I say it causes us to question the truths found in God's Word.
Okay.
Proverbs 30 says,
Here's the thing about truth. If something's true, you questioning it won't change that. If these truths can stand up to scrutiny, then great. They're probably true. If they can't, maybe you shouldn't hang on to them. Thought.
Every word of God is pure. Add thou not unto his words, lest he reprove thee and thou be found a liar. All right, so can we add to this? We can certainly study it. But if it goes against...
Can we add to this? I mean, given how much has been added to and from biblical books over the course of history, the obvious answer is yes. Now, if you want to ask, should you add to it? It's not a discussion that I care to have. You can have whatever theological conclusion you want about that. But, yeah. Just the fact that, say, if you look at the King James Version of the Bible, it has multiple Bible verses that are not found in the text, or at least in the body of the text of modern translations, shows you that absolutely you can add to that text. People did it all the time. In fact, people still do it. Just look at, say, Joseph Smith. He added a whole bunch of new books to the canon. More than you think, because the Book of Mormon is not the only canonical text that is in addition to the Bible that various LDS movements accept. There's also like the Pearl of Great Price, the Doctrine and Covenants, all that stuff. I actually have a copy of Doctrine and Covenants and the Pearl of Great Price somewhere. I got it on a Navy ship. Inkboy for €5 says, I learned how to play your drinking streams. All you need to do is take really small sips, as small as those mini sausages in a packaging we call AIG. Yeah, so I actually modulate how big my gulps or sips or whatever are pretty carefully to avoid becoming so far gone that I just can't deal with it. But that one time we got up to like into the 80s or something, no amount of me trying to dial in my amount of drinking was enough for me to not just be very drunk at the end. That was quite the stream.
Against what God's holy word teaches, then we must stay away. Really, why should this be such an important issue?
I'm going to skip ahead until he gets to more sciencey stuff. I don't care about why he thinks it's an important thing to have whatever interpretation of the Bible he wants. I have discussions about biblical interpretation on my own time with other people, not in public, because this channel is a science claim. I'm not here to tell you what the correct interpretation of the Bible is, or what the Bible does and doesn't say.
I mean, Joseph Stalin was the leader of the Soviet Union.
Oh, good. Joseph Stalin. I almost feel like adding a drink for this to like have either National Socialist German Workers' Party or Joseph Stalin. I mean, Joseph Stalin killed more people than the leader of the National Socialist German Workers' Party, so if we're just going based on raw number of people killed, Stalin's worse.
He was an atheist. He imprisoned millions of people.
Yeah, that's true. Sure, we'll take a drink. Stalin was an atheist, and he did imprison millions of people. And he executed millions more. And he starved to death intentionally, millions more on top of that.
In labor camps, and the official records indicate that he killed at least 3 million individuals. It was probably much higher.
I mean, I would add a conservative estimate, add an order of magnitude, for all the deaths that can be attributable to the government under Stalin. Did he directly kill all of them? Well, I mean, personally, no. He killed essentially no one. But, like, were they killed either as a result of his orders or his policies? Yeah. Yeah. Adding an order of magnitude is not an unreasonable figure. The Soviet Union and the Chinese Communist Party together were the biggest killers during the 20th century by a huge margin of at least as like human-caused deaths. Like it's not the National Socialists. It's definitely the Soviet Union, Chinese Communist Party. And if you go for like percentage of the population, then it's the Khmer Rouge.
Guess what he did? In the public school system, he said, y'all promote atheism. What's going on?
Yeah, he did. So what's going on there is that Marxism has this idea that religion is in some part, not necessarily completely, but has the effect of reducing class consciousness and reinforcing the status quo with the bourgeoisie on top, oppressing the proletariat. And that in order to get rid of this, to increase class consciousness, you need to weaken the grip of religion over the people. Now, other than, I believe, Azerbaijan, no Soviet republic ever really claimed to have completely eliminated religion, either from public or private life. However, religion was heavily discouraged, and in many parts of the Soviet Union, including in Russia, if you were known to be religious, it limited your social mobility. What's one of the reasons why many people hid their religiosity. So, for instance, certain people, if they wanted to get a better job in whatever department they worked in, and they were religious, they wouldn't necessarily be seen going to liturgies. But you might get rumors that so-and-so had his or her daughter or son baptized. That would be a bit of a scandal, but you couldn't prove it, so maybe they didn't. And yeah, that's the reason that he was suppressing religion, was because it was seen as an impediment to the class consciousness, that Marxism sees as important to the communist system of government, or governance, since the ideal under communism is that there's no specific government. People just keep failing to get to that ideal for some reason.
In our country today, what's going on in our colleges today?
If what's going on in your college today is that you're being told that you're not allowed to believe in your religion, or that you should stop believing in your religion, that's being done to you by your professors, you should alert someone. You should seek some kind of legal advice, because that's not okay. It's not what those institutions are for, unless they're private institutions that are, explicitly about that, right? Like if you're going to an explicitly Christian college and they're trying to encourage you to become a Christian, you're not. Well, you signed up for a Christian college. Similarly, if you decided to go to an anti-theist college, which I don't think exists, but if it did, and I wouldn't be opposed to it existing, and you're religious and they were like, no, be an atheist, you knew what you were getting into. But if it's a public school and they're trying to tell you to abandon belief in God, please contact a lawyer, because they shouldn't be doing that. It's illegal.
But what was his foundation? The leader of the Soviet Union, what was his foundation?
Marxism. Like literal reading Karl Marx, like Das Kapital. That's what it was.
Faith. He was walking with a childhood friend one day when he revealed a pretty interesting statement. He said, they're fooling us. There is no God. He said, I'll lend you a book to read, and it will show you that all this talk about God is sheer nonsense. And this world is quite different from what you have ever imagined. And his childhood friend, he's like, what are you talking about, Joseph? What book? What book? And Stalin said, Darwin, you must read it.
Okay, so I've looked for this quote. I cannot find any actual historical source that says this. Now, that might be because I'm just not looking in the right places, or I haven't looked hard enough. But the only place I can find this is on creationist websites. So, if you know of this is like a commission to y'all. If you know that this happened, if you can find a source for this, whether it be like this friend, we can confirm that he's actually a friend of Stalin's who said this, or if it's in any of Stalin's writings that he said this, then I would love to know. Because as far as I can tell, this is just a story that didn't happen, and that's why I'm taking a drink for it. So, okay.
This is the first step on a very dangerous path that actually leads us away from the truths of our Creator, and it can affect society. Even today,
Astral Nekomimi for $4.99 says, it appears the main difference between AIG and Stalinism is what book they read too much into. That is extremely accurate. Oh my goodness, I never really thought about it that way. But yeah, Stalinism is basically, well, to some extent, right? The Soviet Union is what happens when you start taking Das Kapital way too seriously, or the Communist Manifesto. Like, there's more than one book in the Marxist canon. Whereas AIG is what happens if you start taking Genesis way too literally. I personally think more literally than it was even intended by the author to be taken. Authors. But that's neither here nor there. Also, I'm not entirely on board with the idea that authorial intent is the one and only way that a text should be interpreted. Like, I think if you find meaning in a text that was not intended by the author, that doesn't make the meaning that you find in a text invalid. It doesn't make it the meaning the author tried to convey. That doesn't mean it's not there. Where's my play button? Here it is.
The debate rages on. Evolution versus creation, random chance or inspired design. Were we created with purpose, or were we simply conceived from chaos over billions of years? If we were to look at our foundation...
Savage Cobra for $5 US says, Stalin was a disciple of Darwin. That's why he promoted Lysenkoism above Darwinian evolution. Yeah, so that's a good point to put in there. Stalin was actually explicitly opposed to Darwinian evolution, evolutionary biology as it was understood at the time that he was alive. That's why, I don't remember Lysenko's first name. If anyone remembers Lysenko's first name, tag me and put it in there, because I don't want to just call him Lysenko if he didn't have a first name. But Lysenko had this alternate idea about biology, where organisms actually have an innate class consciousness. And it's only existing under capitalistic systems of government and economic policy that creates this competition for resources and space and the struggle to survive and reproduce. And that under more kind communist systems of economy and sociology, that you could do things like not space out your crops, or not worry about, competition between, say, farm animals or different kinds of crops. Trophin Lysenko. Thank you very much, the Fearmonger. That is, in fact, the name that I was looking for. Which is directly opposed to Darwin, right? Darwin is saying that, there's this, tooth and nail struggle for survival, and while cooperation does happen and can be favored, overall, nature is more or less red in tooth and claw. And, the policies that were put in place in terms of farming as a direct result of Stalinist propagation of Lysenkoism resulted in some of those 30 million or so deaths that are attributable to Stalin's regime as a result of famine. It caused huge crop failures all throughout Russia, which then, in some cases, were made up for by just importing food, not by buying it, not by asking nicely, but by just commandeering the food from other places, like Ukraine, which suffered a horrible famine despite having bumper crops, because food was just being stolen by Russia. Kind of gives you an idea as to why maybe Ukraine doesn't want to be conquered by Russia. I don't know. But, yeah, Lysenkoism was a disaster. Now, granted, even without that, the Soviet farming system was horribly inefficient in terms of allocating resources, mostly because, centrally planned economies just collapse. This is what they do. So, yeah. But adding on top of that, the Lysenkoist ideas about farming, you don't need to just give your crop space, you don't have to worry about crop rotation, any of that stuff. That's all just, capitalist nonsense. The plants won't compete with each other. Yes, they absolutely will. And yeah, Jillian Wren is correct. Lysenkoism is what happens when you think evolution is too capitalist. As it turns out, nature doesn't actually care about your economic system. It's going to do what it does anyway. And if what it does is what you think is too capitalist, it doesn't care. It's going to do it anyway. Also, I don't know why we're getting Genesis 1:1 in Hebrew up here. I don't know why it matters, but sure.
I think it can be found in the very first verse of Scripture, which states, Bereshith bara Elohim et hashamayim ve'et haaretz. In English, we know it as, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. That's kind of as foundational as it gets right there. Do you realize if we were to take...
Wait a minute. Does Genesis 1:1 have the direct object markers like he just showed us? I'm going to double check, because I don't have Genesis 1:1 completely memorized in Hebrew. Genesis 1:1 Hebrew. Let's see what happens. Because, maybe it does. Maybe I'm just wrong. It does. Okay, never mind. He's got it. I just didn't remember. So, in case anyone's wondering, if you look at the second line, the far right, which is the first word of the second line, it's et. And that is a direct object marker. It indicates that the following noun is the direct object of the verb. And it's useful in Hebrew because classical Hebrew by default is verb, subject, object, VSO. But because of the way that Hebrew verbs can inflect, don't always have to have an explicit subject. But then sometimes that makes it confusing as to what the direct object is. And so et is like a little marker that you pop in front of there to help clarify that. And so technically it's not super strictly necessary in the sentence. It's not wrong. So yeah, okay, it does have that. Okay, for some reason I didn't remember those being in there, and yeah, they are. So good job, Dave Reeves. You know what, I'll take a drink for you getting the Hebrew right, which is way more than Answers in Genesis usually does. My favorite thing that Answers in Genesis does is whenever you see text in Answers in Genesis, there's like an 80% chance it's upside down. That way it looks like it's left justified. And like once you notice it, it just happens over and over and over again, and you want to pull your hair out because it looks so obviously wrong if you're even broadly familiar with how Hebrew works, or just, most Semitic languages.
In English, we know it as, in the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. That's kind of as foundational as it gets right there. Do you realize if we were to take our Bibles, turn them like this, there's Genesis right there. This is the history of the universe from beginning to end?
No. I'm just going to leave it at no.
Not just past history, future as well. All right? And so what happens when we take away the first verse of Scripture?
I mean, even if you're right that it's just the history of the universe, then your history starts a little later. That's it.
You remove that foundation, everything collapses.
Even in your analogy, that's stupid. I'm just going to take a drink for how stupid this analogy is. So your analogy is that everything is resting on Genesis, but here's the problem. It's actually resting on your hand. You had to take your hand away, not Genesis away. If you actually just published a Bible that didn't have Genesis on it, guess how easy it would be to hold up in your hand? Even easier, because it would be lighter. Guess how easy it would be to put it on a table? Exactly as easy. Get a better analogy, my man. Like, don't actually use a physical Bible as like, what happens if you take away Genesis? And the answer is actually just nothing. Like, you could actually use a house where the foundation is Genesis, and then you have the other books of the Bible going up higher, and then when you take away the foundation, the house collapses. Like, at least do that, man. You have the graphic arts team to do it. Okay, guys, we're going to wrap it up here because we've been going for a bit over 2 hours. It is time to get going. So, what I want to say is we'll take a look at what's coming up soon on the channel. So, on Tuesday, the 28th, plan is right now a Jackson with Jackson. Jackson did say sure when I asked him if you want to do a Jackson with Jackson this Tuesday. On Thursday, I will be premiering the next ICR Dinosaurs Q&A video, which let me take a look at what that one is called so I don't lie to you guys accidentally, which technically wouldn't be a lie, but whatever. Yes, this one is called Microraptor Isn't a Dinosaur, but Velociraptor Is. ICR Lies About Dinosaurs, Part 3 of 3, because of course, just like AIG, ICR seems to think that somehow two different dromaeosaurids, one can be a bird and totally not a dinosaur, and the other one can be a dinosaur and totally not a bird. So, yeah. That's going to be on Thursday. On Saturday, I'm hoping to have another, that'll be Saturday the 1st. I'm planning to have another Dapper Reacts. It'll probably just be a follow-up to this. That's assuming that nothing else comes up. Like if we have like a talk with a creationist, like if Jacob Ostapowitz wants to actually man up and have a discussion instead of running away like a little coward, maybe we can do it on the 1st. And I promise not to call him a coward on that one. I mean, unless he actually chickens out in that one. But yeah, so unless there's something like that that comes, we'll be doing another Dapper Reacts on the 1st. And then on the 4th, it'll be Kent with Bent. And the 6th will actually be The Amazing Animals Obvious Evolution, the movie. That was the two old men who said stupid things and in some cases admitted to possible criminal conduct. And That's the supercut version of that. So that's as far ahead as we're going to look right now. Thank you very much, everyone who's here, especially everyone who's super chatted or gifted memberships or joined the channel. I appreciate that. I have been asked if there will be an after show in Discord. I'm not currently planning that because the next thing I'm going to be doing in about an hour is presumably going on Chesh's channel for the Unnamed Tavern. Now, that's assuming that Chesh has managed to survive because yesterday, she streamed for like 11 hours and 20 minutes in a row. So I'm not sure she's actually up for it, but assuming she is, then I will be on that. So look for me there. With that, guys, again, thank you so much. If you're interested in supporting the channel, there's a number of options. There's the Patreon, there's the memberships. If a monthly or annual thing isn't your thing, but you still want to support, there's a Spring store linked in the description. There's also an Amazon wish list, which it's mostly just things for me, but there are some tech things that could help the channel. A new monitor, or I have a backup keyboard on there because this keyboard is getting a little old and it's probably not going to last, a huge amount of more time. There's also stuff like dice, or if you want to get me like some packs of the ramen I like, that's on there. Don't get the rice though. I still have like 90 something pounds of rice. I don't need rice. Anyway, with that, I will see all of you hopefully in an hour, and if not then on Tuesday.
Thanks for watching, but before you go, I just want to say a special thank you to my channel members and my patrons, especially those pledging $20 or above.
Bob Knob, Work in Progress, Benthoven, Tapioca Weasel, Cynically Skeptic, Denny5252, Elron Teller, Farava, Ian Chen, Landon Knoll, Mabdy Babbity, San, Sphincter of Doom, and the Venerable Bede.
As you probably know, YouTube is a very volatile platform, and from month to month my income on the channel can swing wildly. But the people you see on screen are directly supporting, so that I don't have to worry too much about that, and the channel can keep going as it is, and perhaps even improving. If you'd like to join this team, there are links below to join the channel or in the description to join the Patreon. The Patreon starts as low as $1 a month, and the channel memberships start as low as $1.99 a month. On Patreon, you can even get a discount for pledging annually. If you do decide to pledge, you'll get access to an exclusive Discord server just for channel supporters, as well as early access to all of my pre-recorded videos, often up to 2 months in advance. Higher tiers will unlock even better perks. Now, if the annual or monthly pledge isn't right for you, but you still want to support the channel, there is a merch store down in the description, as well as an Amazon wish list, just for me. And if financial support isn't something you can or want to do, then if you still want to help out the channel, please just like and share these videos and make sure you comment on them. It really helps the channel out. Thanks again for watching.